Welcome back to the Sensible Astrologer podcast. Today's guest is Mandy, Mindful Mandy. She is a psychic medium. She is also a researcher, and I found her on TikTok because she was presenting a lot of information about the conspirituality to supremacist pipeline, specifically the star seeds spirituality to supremacist pipeline. And that's something that I've been talking about for quite a while now. And it was just great to find someone else in my field talking about it as well. So, Mandy, welcome to the show. And if you want to introduce yourself a little more, you can go ahead and do that with your big three if you know it.
Yeah, my name is Mandy. My real name is Samantha, but I am a psychic medium, like you said. And my big three, gosh, I've been told I don't know much about astrology. That's like very much not my wheelhouse. I've been told like I'm like I guess my sun's or like the main sign is a Pisces, but everything else is Aries.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, I guess that someone told me I was a triple Aries, and I don't know. I guess that's those are my big three. Are
Oh,
all
okay.
Aries or
Okay. Well, one of these days, you'll have to get a birth chart reading and we could talk about it more. Very
yeah.
cool. Yeah. Well, the thing about Pisces is that they're very tuned in, and I find a lot of people in our field are Pisces or 12th housers because, they're tuned into the spiritual realm, the other realms. And then the Aries energy, that's your fire. That's you calling things out, calling out the BS on TikTok, people who are being unethical and all that, which we all love you for. So that would totally make sense. So, anyways, so when did you first become aware of the conspirituality slash star seeds to supremacist pipeline? And what made you want to research it? What made you want to go down that rabbit hole?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because like I think like a lot of people probably around 2020, 2021 was sort of when everything kind of came to a head.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people did not quite realize the intersection between spirituality and conspiracy theory had
Right.
such a chokehold, and was such a big thing until we all saw what happened on January 6th. And we were all
100%.
exposed to Jake Angelini, aka the QAnon shaman. I think that's how you say his name, but he had like the Starseed Academy, which was like this thing he was doing online for several years, and he was very much kind of the face of conspirituality. And it fascinated me because in the beginning of my spiritual development and journey, that was sort of my entry point and the doorway into spirituality was in more of the
Yes.
new age.
Yes.
So when I started realizing that there was like an overlap, it really did fascinate me. I had already kind of been in that position of deconstructing from new age ideas and ideologies that I had very much integrated into my belief systems. And so when I saw that, it really kind of was the thing that tipped me over the edge into like, I need to understand more of like why this is happening because it just did not make sense to me. Like, I didn't understand how this spirituality and conspiracy theory and moving into like these alt-right spaces, it blew my mind and I had no idea. So that's what kind of sent me off the diving board into the deep end of like learning about this stuff and really really wanting to understand like how the hell does this happen.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting because I mean, we all remember that day. I remember I was virtually teaching my class, and then I just got like all these news alerts on my phone that it was happening. So that, oh my gosh, like they're finally taking action. And this is very concerning. So, I mean, it could definitely happen again, not to fearmonger, but these online spaces are definitely still relevant. And it could definitely happen anytime again. The other thing with it, I think, Mandy, is like, the spiritual realm is about the unseen, and the conspiracy theories, those are also about the unseen and the unknown. So I think that those two can have an overlap if people don't have ethics nor boundaries with their spiritual practices, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like, I think looking back now and kind of having studied sort of like how this happens, Um, I think a lot of it had to do with sort of the certainty that comes along with some of these ways of thinking. Like this idea that you have like special knowledge that other people
Right.
don't, and, all of these kinds of like tropes that you kind of fall into when you start navigating spirituality,
Mhm.
that do lead you to these kinds of conclusions, and they kind of close the door on critical thinking as well. I don't say completely, but they do have a
Right.
tendency to kind of like the thought, what's it, the thought stopping cliche type ways of like, well, everything happens for a reason, and I'm
Mhm.
awakened and you're not, like the us versus them, all of
Mhm.
those types of thinking that you end up seeing coming into your spiritual practice or beliefs from like a lot of the new age tend to also overlap with people who are very much into conspiracy. I
Yes.
understand this, I see the patterns, the special knowledge, like,
Mhm.
so I think you can really start to see how that parallel kind of like they fall right into one another. So
Yeah.
once you start looking at it.
Yeah, 100%. And sometimes it's the ego too. Like I know this. I am 100% certain I was shown, I was told, I was watching this specific tarot reader say this, and I trust everything they say. So yeah, there's definitely that certainty that can be very dangerous
Mm-hmm.
when it's not paired with, critical thinking or any kind of rationale or any kind of research that's not because a lot of these, when they call it research, they're not primary sources,
No.
they're not historical sources, they're just basically stories or anecdotes that people are saying online. So yeah. So, we talked about this on kind of like a shallow level. I want to go a little deeper. So, like, why are people so susceptible to this, specifically at this now moment? I mean, I know before we roll the cameras, we are talking about, right before World War II began, we had Uranus and Taurus. So there was instability of resources, and people were, in this place where they weren't sure about their finances and things of that nature. And then Uranus and Gemini happened, in the thick of World War II, where there was a lot of bifurcation of information, a lot of propaganda, because Gemini is about information. So there was a lot of propaganda, even in the US. Here in the US, there's propaganda for patriotism. So, I mean, we're seeing those themes repeated again. And
Yes.
a lot of that propaganda, of course, in Nazi Germany was used to eliminate a lot of people, unfortunately. So, I see people becoming susceptible to these tropes. Why do you think certain people are susceptible to these tropes? What is it about them or their background, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think it's kind of twofold too, because it's kind of like you said with I don't think it's necessarily like spirituality as much as it is the certainty that one can have in their understanding or their belief system, right? So because we don't just see it with New Age, we're also going to see it with Christianity,
That's
like
true.
occult spaces, people with political, within political ideologies, wellness communities, like any belief system in and of itself, if you lean more into certainty within that belief system, that I think ultimately can make you vulnerable or susceptible to be more amendable to authoritarian type of thinking and to lean into and be okay with authoritarian sort of things that are happening, right? And I think certainty is, it can make people feel very comfortable. It gives people a sense of
Yes.
security and
Yes.
safety, and that's where it comes from. Is I think it comes from, like you said, times of instability.
Mhm.
And if you look at like even historically, like you were talking about, like even after World War I, people were very disillusioned, disenfranchised
Yeah.
with the way the world was going with industrialization. Like they were just
Mhm.
not happy, and things were scarce. There was scarcity of resources, like it was a lot going on. And so leaning into these theosophical and theological ideas and beliefs and spirituality and esoteric knowledge gave people a sense of meaning for like what they were going through and a way to understand it, when in actuality it's very complex, and it kind of reduces it to this level of like, well, this is the reason for this, and so they lean into it with certainty, and the minute you start doing that, it feels good because now you feel in control. You feel you have an explanation. And so you're just, I think at that point, that's where people become susceptible. The minute that a belief system goes from, something that you can question or
Mhm.
something that, you are curious about and it becomes ultimate truth or certain, you become certain within that belief system, that's where I think it starts to fodder. I
Yeah.
think that's where the gray zone is, to be honest.
I agree with you. I totally agree. So, can you explain that term theosophy for those people, who are in the audience who don't know what that is? Because a lot of people actually are reenacting a lot of these tropes from
Mm-hmm.
theosophy, and they don't even know that they are. I mean, myself included, because when I started dipping my toes into spiritual social media about 6 years ago, I actually thought, okay, this Starseed thing makes sense. But then I saw that it was causing a lot of people to repeat blood libel tropes,
Yes.
racism, things of that nature. And, a lot of people who are just watching at home are like, well, I believe in star seeds, like, but I'm not racist. I love everybody. What are you talking about? So could you explain the origins of that
Yeah.
and, how I'll say the Yahtzee party, the Yahtzee party kind of incorporated some of these themes from theosophy and star seeds to, execute what they did.
Yeah, so Theosophy started with Helena Blavatsky, who was
Mhm.
a Russian clairvoyant medium, who claimed to channel different beings, and it was through. And she went. From my understanding, she did sit with different spiritual people from different spiritual sects, and I do believe when you look at what Blavatsky kind of put together to create the Theosophical movement, it really is kind of this spiritual stew of different, like she took from Hinduism, and I know she
Right.
took from Buddhism, and she kind of like took from all these different esoteric spiritualities that were very ancient and kind of mixed them together and almost kind of just created this like spiritual stew, if you will.
Mhm. Makes
Um,
sense.
and and she did a lot of channeling, and one of the things that she talked about and channeled was this idea of root race theory.
Hmm.
And the root race theory is really, I think, we can kind of look back and see how problematic this idea is, but
Yes.
it really talked about there being certain souls that incarnate into certain parts of the world that and in certain bodies, and each there's like, I think there was a total of seven, I think
That sounds right.
there's seven. And basically the idea was that depending upon what race you were in determines sort of your purpose in the
Hmm.
world, spiritually and physically. And through that, I mean, I don't necessarily think that in the beginning with her, it started as a idea of like, well, these people are more, superior or pure than
Right.
others necessarily, but it was
Right.
more of just a way to understand these different sort of where the souls kind of originate from.
Yeah.
And it really started with von List, Guido von List. He was kind of one of
Hmm.
the first people to really, I think, embrace the idea of theosophy and occultism and really kind of internalize this and kind of create his own sort of spiritual movement out of
Hmm.
theosophy, which
Hmm.
then led itself to something called Aristophagy. I can't even say it. Aristophagy?
It's very hard to say.
It is.
Aristotle. Yeah. Aristotle. Yeah. So
Yeah.
what I'm getting is like Blotsky. I think that's how you say her name. I know I'm probably butchering it, but it sounds like her intention with the root race theory wasn't to cause racism. It's kind of more like
No.
how an astrologer like me would say, okay, you're a Capricorn, you have these traits, that's why, or like your North Node is an Aries, you're meant to be a pioneer, that kind of thing. It wasn't meant to
Yes.
divide people, it was meant to just help people understand their purpose. But this Aristophagy, I want to say Aristophagy.
I
I don't
believe
know
it's
why I want to do that.
aristocracy. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds, and I'm sure you're going to explain a little bit more in a second. That was meant to divide people and meant to make people have a superiority complex about their so-called root race. Is that correct?
Yes, that's exactly what kind of happened and it stemmed from it. And Von List actually, he passed well before the formation of the Third Reich and the Yahtzee Party.
Mhm.
It was more or less people within that sect, what became the Yahtzee Party,
Mhm.
essentially kind of took von List's ideas and they really adopted aristocracy and used it sort of as a framework and a format for how they viewed themselves as superior, because they said, I think it was, they said that the Aryan race was the fifth
Correct.
root race.
Correct.
I think it was, I can't remember where the continent was, the lost, they talk about, lost
Atlantis.
Numeria and Atlantis. And
Yeah.
there's one specifically where the Aryans came from, supposedly.
Mhm.
But they really latched on to this idea. And not to say that it like caused what happened, but there's
Right.
definitely it influenced a lot of the ways in which they thought, and people really latched onto these ideas of purity, of superiority, and hierarchical ways of thinking of themselves, and then seeing
Mhm.
other people in other spaces and places in the world. So it really was and it wasn't, this happened over a long period of time. This wasn't something
Right.
that happened overnight. It's something
No.
that, I mean, this took, we're talking about like, a 50 some odd year span,
Right.
essentially. It was a long
Right.
time for this to kind of all sort of come to the fore. But you can see how how spiritual ideas, certainty, and ideology in and of itself can influence political ways of being, nationalism,
Yes.
all of that. So you can see how it influenced policy. It was influencing the systems to some degree. So there's some level of that was happening, and it's just kind of snowballed over time, really.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. From what I remember when I was reading Schmittler's Monsters, I'll put it like that, or Mustache Man's Monsters, which you guys can get on Amazon or perhaps your local library.
such a good book.
It is such a good book. Yeah, it's very thorough.
Mm-hmm.
And the author did put in there that they believe that they were Atlanteans and they were the Nordic star
Yes.
seeds, right? They were Nordics, and that, other people might have been reptilians or vampires, which I know there was like a vampire star seed group, but or they were akin
Mm-hmm.
to vampires, and then the Nordics were werewolves, and this was like
Yes.
all based off of a lot of kind of folk tales. It's the volkism. I think they call
Yes,
volk.
Volkism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Not to be confused with wokeism, but volk because it's a German word for folk. So I don't want people to think I'm trying to say woke, but it's volk. But they were trying to create this culture where it was very unified for Germans, so that it gave them inspiration to be more unified and fight against outsiders,
Yeah.
in their nationalist ways. So it's very interesting that that happened. And of course, there was eugenics going around, measuring people's head sizes. Like, okay, do Nordics have this kind of head measurements versus like what they would call gypsies back then, which are the Romani or Jews or, whomever. They would start measuring people's skulls
Yeah.
after, offing them in the camps to prove their superior, well, the Nordic or the Aryan superiority as well. So it is this. I would say it could create a domino effect and a slippery slope with some of these belief systems that people have and are certainly parroting online right now. And like you said, we saw them in action on J6. So, based on what you're seeing at this now moment, where we are in time, and we're recording this in August 2026. So, what kind of personal and societal consequences that have happened in the past that we've just touched on a little bit? How do you think that they're going to either repeat themselves or maybe take a new form? Due to this kind of conspirituality slash star seeds. Some of them don't believe in the star seed stuff, but to this supremacist pipeline, like I'm better, I know better, you're not awakened, that kind of mentality.
Yeah, I think there's been a big push in a lot of different spaces, not just in spiritual spaces, but in general to other people.
Yes.
The us versus them mentality, right? And I think anytime there is a hierarchical level of thinking that is brought to the fore, with whether it be through like a spiritual belief or ideology or a political ideology, right? Like we see this with demonization of immigrants and
Mhm.
immigration. And this isn't something that's unique to the United States. This is happening all over the
All
world.
over. Yeah.
And it's becoming more and more obvious. And I think when we start seeing that kind of the kind of language that dehumanizes people, or I mean, you see it in spiritual spaces when people talk
Yes.
about, oh, well, I'm awake and those people are asleep, or what's the other one that I hear people
Chosen.
NPCs, like when they talk
NPCs.
about
Yeah.
like like, oh, there's NPCs and it's very main character energy. The
Mhm.
minute you start making it very individualized, or there's this hyper individualistic way of thinking, like if it's not happening to me directly, I don't need to worry about it.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Like
Th-
this
that's
isn't
that's a problem.
real. Yeah, that oh my gosh, that grinds my gears so much, Mandy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, the worst one the other day was you're not menopause isn't real. It's in your mind, that kind of thing. I know that that's been going around the socials as well, that people they can manifest their way out of, the hormonal
Perimenopause.
changes. Perimenopause and menopause. So it's that kind of thing. It's this very selfish way of looking at things like, okay, well, maybe this person had an easier time with their hormonal changes, so therefore everybody else should have that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
the hyper individualistic way of thinking. And like I said, I think the more we see that kind of vocabulary used on larger platforms or just become more normalized, I think that that's really where the danger is, and I think that that's really what I'm concerned, because I feel like I keep seeing it becoming more and more prevalent.
Yes.
And I think that like I really think that that's kind of, I mean, these things don't automatically become authoritarian, necessarily, but they open up the doorway for people to be more receptive to,
Yeah.
like, well, this is the solution, so like I'm gonna lean into it, or you know what I mean, or well, yeah, I hate to wait, like, I'm not gonna say false equivalency, but that's kind of what it feels like. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, I think these ideas of star seeds, light workers, anytime you start placing a special mission or purpose upon yourself or
Right. A
a group of
label.
people,
Hmm.
that's where the danger lies. Like I think that that's really where we run into a place where people are no longer willing to, because once they identify with that, it can become really hard to sort of, um, when you've integrated something so deeply and you start to really identify with it, there's less likely of a chance that you're going to question it or be curious about it enough to
Yeah.
say, does this really make sense?
Yeah.
You
It
know what I
becomes a
mean?
part of your identity. And
Yeah.
it's hard to disintegrate or detach from that identity if that's what made you manage your life during a difficult time,
Yes.
right? And,
Yeah.
that goes even like back to other things that people have gone through that might not even be spiritual. If somebody tells you, oh, you're really good at this and that, and then that becomes part of your identity. And then when you lose that talent because of age or whatever, or an injury, then you have to reintegrate in a new way. And it becomes very difficult for the ego to handle that.
Yeah.
So I definitely think you're right about that. And we saw this happen a lot, at least I saw this happen. I'm sure you did too, around the pandemic, where I
Mm-hmm.
would see a lot of people say, okay, well, I don't have the jab. This is what they would say. So therefore, I'm going to go up in the ascension, which is essentially like the rapture. It's like the new age version of the rapture. For those who are watching and don't understand what that is, it's just basically like repeating like right wing church tropes back in the new age. And then those people who have the jab, like they're going to hell. They're not going to go up with the ascension. They're not chosen. So it's all these special labels that people create to deal with stress,
Yeah.
essentially, is what my theory is.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it comes down to It comes down to I need to find meaning because everything feels uncertain. So I need some
Yeah.
certainty to grasp onto. So this belief provides me with a meaning. It provides me with explanation for what I'm experiencing. I'm going to lean into it. I'm going to hold on to it and I'm going to integrate it. And that's where I think the rubber meets the road. Um, because the question isn't like, are these ideas true or false? It's more
Right.
about like, what kind of worldview can this lead to
Right.
when they're treated as absolute truth, when these ideas are
Correct.
treated as absolute truth? Because it's one thing to take what's true for you and hold that for yourself as a belief. But it's
Sure.
another when you start, kind of thinking of this as absolute and this is certain. And this is true for any spiritual practice, any
Correct.
belief system. The minute you start saying that this is absolute, this is universal law, I think that in any group or in any space,
Yeah.
it let go. It releases the ability for questioning. Critical
Yeah.
thinking is, kind of, it takes that away once you've integrated this as certain, and that's where I think things get really dicey.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Because then it leads to dehumanization,
Mm-hmm.
and that this group is the enemy. Everybody else who thinks differently,
Yeah.
does things differently than us, they're the enemy, and they must be eliminated. And on a spiritual level, what, and this could be in any space, like you were saying, not just new age spirituality. It could be in religions and things of that nature, that this group needs to go so that we can fulfill our mission here on this earth, because they're evil and we're good. And it almost seems like a projection. And when I was reading the Schmittler's Monster book, um, it seemed like the Third Reich, everything that they were doing to the victims in the concentration camp of all religions, ethnicities, sexualities that they would place in there, they seem to be perpetrating those horrendous atrocities onto those people that they were saying that those people were doing in society. So
Yes.
that's very interesting as well, that we can kind of see that reflected in this now moment, the
Yeah.
treatment, because the other people, the outsiders, so to speak, aren't inflicting those things. They're just minding their own business. And here they are being judged and labeled.
Yeah.
So, based on all that, like, what are some red flags that audiences need to be aware of when watching spiritual content creators? Because you and I are in these spaces and they're unregulated. We don't have a union. And that's kind of nice in a way because we don't have anybody checking us and we don't have oversight. I think the only people who are checking us are our clients, which would make sense, but we don't have an ethics committee or an ethics board. So, what are some red flags that the audiences can look out for, because there aren't any checks and balances?
Yeah, that's a great question. For myself, I've always said anyone who speaks in absolutes when it comes to spirituality, that we all need to recognize that when people are speaking about their experiences, that this is personal gnosis, right? This is anecdotal on so many levels. And if something is true for one person, it doesn't automatically make it true for another. So this is where I say that like anybody who is saying, speaking in absolutes, that their understanding is deeper than others, or that they're privy to some sort of like special knowledge that other
Right,
people aren't. That's a big red flag.
right,
When someone's philosophy becomes, or ideology that they hold personally, if they're trying to project that as an ultimate or universal law or truth, that's a very big red flag. I think that and we do see that a lot, and I think a lot of times it's just projection, and I think it's a lot of times many people come into the spiritual space, they are coming from organized religion where there was a lot of
sure.
proselytization, there was a
Yeah,
lot of projection, and if they haven't done the sort of deconstruction work from organized religion, there tends to be those kinds of patterns that they witnessed and the reasons they left the church. They start
right.
mimicking and mirroring those exact same patterns, but just in a different font, so to
Yeah,
speak. And so that's
100%.
usually like the red flags that I've noticed. So if you're not allowed to question, that's a big one. Like
Yeah,
if you're demonized for questioning, or you're outed for questioning, or you're you're othered for it, that's a huge red flag, because we should be able to have healthy debate, healthy discussion around different beliefs, explanations, concepts in spirituality. I think anytime someone shoots that down, that's a red flag for me. So,
Yeah. So it's essentially like somebody who's acting like a demagogue, like their
mm-hmm.
word is final. They knew
Yes.
everything. They have the answer to everything. And they're not going to even tell you where they're getting their information from or where they learned it from. You just have to
Yeah.
believe them. And
Yep.
if you don't, your your character is assassinated.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone who puts themselves in a position of authority, I think that's always a red flag because now we're looking at a hierarchy.
Mhm.
And there is a power dynamic, I think,
Yeah.
between anyone who does spiritual work and the general public. And we have to
Correct.
be we have to be aware of that power dynamic.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to operate from a place of humility. And I think a good like a green flag
Yeah. Yeah.
would be like, you know, someone who encourages questioning, who
Yeah.
encourages curiosity, and encourages critical thinking, and you know, is willing to take criticism or questioning and actually do something with it, and in a constructive manner, right? Go deeper. um, I think we should constantly be checking ourselves personally
Yeah.
in this work. You know, I think healthy spirituality asks that of us. And
Mhm.
so I always say, don't be afraid to ask hard questions about what it is you're taking in, looking at it through a broader lens, and don't take things at face value, you know?
No. Yeah. And it's not just about follower count too, because
Yeah.
follower count, there's people with low follower accounts that are just starting out in these spaces, or maybe they don't know how to market themselves and they're very talented. And there could be people who are geniuses in marketing themselves, and that's what they're good at, is personal
Yeah.
marketing, personal branding. And that's why they get that so-called cult following. I'll put that in quotation marks. It may or may not be a real cult sometimes.
It's
So yeah.
definitely, there's a dynamic there, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think I'll add one more red flag and one more green flag. One more red flag is when you have audiences stepping up to defend that person, no
Yeah.
matter what they do. And I think, you and I are probably thinking of the same person right now, something that just
Yeah.
happened that probably won't be relevant in a year if somebody watches this later. Um, so that's definitely a red flag, is when audiences are jumping to defend them no matter what. But a green flag would be someone who is not necessarily trying to prove themselves right. They're just
Yeah.
trying to, like give some helpful information. It's not about them, it's about the audience. So
Yes.
I think that's always a green flag, that they're just trying to give some helpful information out, and it's not necessarily to make themselves look more important. So, and if you could think of any other green flags, I'm sure we wouldn't mind. You know,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very, very true. You speak to this idea of like follower count and
yeah,
social currency and all these things. And the truth is that like follower count does not equate to, it's not an equivalence to like how well someone works, how ethical someone is. Like you said, it really comes down to aesthetics and marketing and how do they put themselves out there. And I think that that's a really unfortunate thing because people do equate follower count, social currency with the amount of authority and credibility that people will give to somebody in these spaces. And that's not always going to be an equal, you know, it's not equivalent. And I think that
no,
that's a really hard place to find ourselves because there's so much crap online, misinformation,
yeah,
disinformation everywhere you look. And I would say, you know, it's as far as like the red flags, I think just making sure that anyone you do follow, I would not be afraid to ask them like, where did you learn this? What's your line of development look like? You know, what have you done to kind of like, because I think any good practitioner would be willing to share those resources with you and their journey with you. And I think anytime someone's kind of gatekeeping that or very secretive about that, that can also be a bit of a red flag too.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Or they're teaching something very differently than how it's ever been taught before. So, like, not honoring the tradition of that. whatever that is that they're doing. So like for mediumship or astrology or tarot, like they're just kind of throwing out all of the foundations and creating a new thing, like throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And
Yeah.
that's always been a red flag to me too. Like I discovered this new way and my way is the only way and everybody else is an idiot. Like, no, 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 no. Maybe your way is really good, but we don't have to call other people idiots and scammers and things of that nature. So I've seen that in the astrological community a lot.
Oh, I
So we
bet.
talked about some red flags and green flags. And of course, guys, always use your discernment, trust yourself, and make sure that it's not divisive, whatever it is, because that's not what this is about. Spirituality is here to help you grow, not to help you shrink and put you in more angry spaces.
Yeah.
So yeah. So based on your historical and sociological research, because I know you've read a lot of books and articles, and I'll be happy to post them here in
Hmm.
the information section down below. Where do you think the trajectory of this conspirituality, possibly star seeds, some people who believe in that kind of stuff, to supremacy pipeline is headed as, we wrap up this decade? Because we're 6 years in and there's been a lot of very disturbing things that are going on in this collective. It's not just in these spiritual spaces, but a lot of people are becoming more narrow-minded, more hateful, more exclusive instead of inclusive. So and also not just based on your research, Mandy, but also on your talents and your intuitive talents, kind of like, what do you see happening here?
I mean, I think the harder things get, the more challenging things get society wise, with political instability, economic anxiety, technological, upheaval, techno feudalism,
Yeah.
the rise of AI.
Yeah.
People are more isolated than ever, yet we're more connected than ever to information, which is so kind of
Yes.
this like weird dichotomy that we're living in at the
Yeah.
moment.
Very Pluto and Aquarius, Uranus and
Yep.
Gemini, it's all changing very quickly,
Yep.
rapidly.
Yeah, and misinformation spreads like wildfire rather than actual true information. I think there, because there is so much uncertainty with everything. I do think that, to be totally honest, I think that a lot of these supremic ideas, they've been ingrained in our systems for so long.
Yes.
It, the people that are currently holding office and holding power,
Mhm.
unfortunately, many of them align with these ideas and these
I agree.
ideologies. Whether
Agree.
they will ever admit it or not, another thing I learned in my research, and I really don't want to talk too much about this because it's actually quite terrifying.
Yeah,
Um,
I understand. We're
is
on the same page. We're on the
Yeah.
same page. Yeah.
There's the plan. I hate to say, and this sounds conspiratorial, but it's really not, because of the things that I learned from sources that were in a lot of these groups. Um, Infiltration has always been the end game, and I think that
Yes.
we're there already, and
Yes.
that's very unfortunate. And I think that that calls for more and more people to assess and critically think about everything that they see, to really not be afraid to question what is in front of you, because the things that we're being told, things that are, the way things are presented is not, it's not always 100% of the facts.
Correct.
Or it may be distorted, and we need to be very cognizant of the undertones of what is going on. And I think that with the rise of anti-intellectualism,
Mhm.
um, this idea of attacking people who are, scientists and doctors, and you're seeing these people like be attacked, um,
Literally, physically
literally,
attacked.
yeah,
Physically
literally
attacked.
attacked. It's a very dark place I think we're in right now, to be honest. And
I
where
agree.
it's headed, I wish I could say, my hope is that this will open the eyes of people who maybe haven't really seen it, and they'll start to see the parallels. But it's unfortunate that it's taken it to get this bad and this overt for people to realize and actually
Mhm.
take action.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And just to add to what you were saying, I think you are in the medical field. Is that
Yeah, I'm a
correct?
nurse by trade. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. There you
Yeah.
go. I was watching the Oprah podcast the other day, and I believe the title of the podcast is "Why Are We So Mean Now?" I believe it's something like that. I'm not saying it verbatim. And she had people from various different industries come on, sectors that are the most physically attacked. She didn't have any educators on there, which I thought was interesting because as a former educator, I could tell you we are physically attacked on a daily basis, many of
Yeah.
us, not just by students, by parents as well, which is
Yeah.
very disturbing. But a lot of people in the medical field are actually getting physically attacked. I think it's like the numbers were up by 85 or 87%. So it was
Yeah.
something like that. And when Oprah was asking this doctor, like, why do you think your nurses are getting attacked at this level? Because one of her nurses was attacked to the point where she had to be hospitalized, and why her peers are being attacked. She said it's because a lot of people, ever since the pandemic, they've been hearing that basically the medical industry is trying to hurt them and not help them. So they've lost trust. And I understand the losing trust part because, things, there was a lot of moving different pieces. So I get that. But then with this information that basically these doctors are here to harm you and not to help you. And so people get angry and they lash out and they are now doing physical things. So that reminded me of what you were saying, that there is this mistrust of institutions now, and it's not entirely wrong because
Right. It's
you
valid
know
to some degree. Yeah.
right, it is valid to some degree because our medical system, especially in this country, it's not working for most of the population. Like it's
Yep.
taking a long time to get into places and that kind of thing. And with the education system, there's a lot of flaws and things need to be overhauled. They do need to be fixed, and unfortunately we have a lot of Pluto and Leo, the boomer people still in office, not willing to give up the reins so that we can innovate here as younger folks. We're not kids anymore. I mean, we're middle aged. So it's like let us innovate. But yeah, there's a lot of mistrust. And I think some of that mistrust is turning into violence because of a lot of misinformation and conspiratorial thinking that we're getting from these online spaces.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it comes down to, once again, certainty. Feeling like they have the answer and the understanding and the knowing when actually there's a lot of nuance involved. And people aren't comfortable with nuance. I feel like a lot of times people have a tendency to, they want an absolute, they want someone
Yes.
to blame. And I've seen it, I worked the pandemic as bedside nurse, and it was really, I mean, I was doing reproductive nursing. I was an OBGYN, but
Yeah.
still, I mean, I
Still,
was still in the hospital during
yes.
that time. And, I think a lot of, we went from being, applauded and, like reared as healthcare heroes and essential
Sure.
providers to not being able to wear your scrubs out, because it was
Mhm.
dangerous. And it's
You were
still,
demonized.
yeah, it was a very scary, scary time. And I feel like we're coming back upon that because of the powers that are currently the mouthpieces for
Yes.
what's happening now. And I think a lot of that sentiment is coming back. And um, I don't, it's misplaced. It's misplaced
It is
anger. I get
misplaced.
it.
Yes.
So many people were traumatized what happened in 2020, and they have yet to process or deal with that trauma,
Mhm.
vicarious trauma, and, individual trauma. And I think that that leads to a space of grief and anger, and that's where that
Yes.
comes from. And people are looking for someone to blame. They want to place,
Helplessness too.
yeah,
Mhm.
helpless. Yep, exactly. So I think that that's it's kind of scary to see that resurgence and just how bad it's gotten over the years.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes, I completely agree with you. All right. Well, as we wrap up, because I know you have a client, where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so if you want to connect with me, you can find me on TikTok. I go by Mindful Media Mandy or Mindful Mandy. I can't ever remember which handle TikTok likes to use.
Mindful Mandy is your
It
TikTok. I remember that. Yeah.
and then on Instagram, I'm Mindful Mandy 108. And then I have my website where you can find all of the information about me at 108mindfullymade.com. That is my website. And I think that's those are the primary places I'm on. YouTube as Mindful Medium Samantha with some digits at the end. Um, I don't really post a lot to YouTube,
I get it.
um, but yeah. So that's where you can find me. So yeah,
Awesome. Well, I'll put all that information below so if people would like to connect for a mediumship reading, they can. Well, thank you, Mandy. It was great connecting with you today and having
yeah,
this very important information presented in such a calm and grounded way. That's a big reason why I had you on because I know that you would say it in a calm and grounded way and not get people more riled up and angry because we don't need more anger right now. We
no,
need to take practical action as a collective and start unifying because with this Chiron and Taurus for the next 7 years, there's going to be a lot of, economic changes and whatnot. So we need to use that Pluto and Aquarius mindfully and, just become more friendly with each other because believe it or not, guys, we have a lot more in common than we have differences. Start humanizing everyone you meet. Stop
yes,
dehumanizing people just because they come from a different background than you or have a different belief system than you. Once we start humanizing each other, go to different places, not just restaurants, but go to different places that you might not be accustomed to. Travel helps. And if you can't travel, then just go to like the whatever, little, whatever, there's little places like I call Little Italy, Little China, whatever it is near your big city. And I'm sure you'll start getting to know people from all different faiths and backgrounds. Anyways, Mandy, it was great having you on. And guys, don't forget to like this, share this, and of course, subscribe. So, all right. Thanks, Mandy. Bye, everyone. Thank
bye,
you.
thank you.
Bye.